everyone. Welcome to Textile Talks. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to reshare that. That doesn't look great. How's that, Lucy?
We're not full screen, but we can see your slides.
Yeah, that's so strange. Let's see. I'm going to try that one more time. Tell us where you're joining from, everyone. I'm in Western North Carolina, and it is sunny and beautiful right now. It didn't start out that way. Let's see. How about that?
That looks good.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm Amy Milne. I'm the executive director of the Quilt Alliance, and I'm seeing some great chat. I'd love to hear where you're connecting from today. And if you're an artist yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself. We haven't done that in the chat in a while. We always love to hear who's connecting to these talks. Thank you for joining. We've got a great program today with our guests, Brian Nigus and Amy Green from the Pacific Northwest Quilt and Fiber Arts Museum. And Textile Talks, if you've been connecting regularly, you know it's a weekly series presented on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's a partnership between the Quilt Alliance and our three partner organizations shown here: International Quilt Museum, Studio Art Quilt Associates, or SAQA, and Surface Design Association. All Textile Talks are recorded and available via YouTube, so you can catch up. That is just one of the great things about this series that has been so generously supported by our sponsors, who you saw featured in our video at the beginning. But if you miss a talk, you can look for them in our YouTube recording playlist, and Lucy Shaken will, my colleague from SAQA, will share those in the chat box for you to see. The Quilt Alliance mission is to document, preserve, and share the stories of all quilts and all quilt makers. And our projects include Quilters Save Our Stories, QSOS, which is a collection of oral history interviews with quilters archived with our partners at the Library of Congress and the University of Kentucky. Go Tell It is a video documentation project designed to preserve the stories of quilts as told by their makers or owners. It's a simple formula: one person, one quilt, one camera, 3 minutes or less, another quilt story saved. It's presented on YouTube, and you can find out more about the Quilt Alliance and the QSOS or Go Tell It projects by visiting our website. Quiltalliance.org is our main site, and you can see here the qsos.quiltalliance.org is the QSOS website. And you can find the Go Tell It videos on our YouTube channel. Visit our website. Consider becoming a member or a donor. For as little as $30 a year, you can be an individual member. And we really rely on this kind of community support to carry out our important mission. I want to give you a quick reminder about using the Q&A box so we can make sure that we don't miss your questions. Put your questions for our presenters there. And the chat box, use that to tell us a little bit about yourself, comment on the presentation. If you have any questions about the technical, about what's going on with the techniques or the IT aspect of today, feel free to put a note there. And make sure you notice that we have enabled closed captions. So if you would like, you can look for and press the CC or live captions button, or go into your settings to turn on or off your captions. So I want to tell you a little bit about who you're going to hear from today. Let me change that. I'm getting cut off here. I don't want to cut off any of my slides. There we go. The interview you're going to hear is with Brian Nigus and Amy Green from the Pacific Northwest Quilt and Fiber Arts Museum. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the museum before we start, and I'll give you a quick bio about each of our presenters and then turn it over to them. The Pacific Northwest Quilt and Fiber Arts Museum is a vibrant museum located in Washington State's Skagit Valley, midway between Seattle and Vancouver, BC. You can see on the map here. Looks beautiful. It was founded in 1997 and housed in a historic mansion, housed in a historic mansion in Le Conner. It draws visitors from around the world with 3 floors of frequently rotating exhibits and an annual International Quilts and Fiber Arts Festival. Le Conner is a center for arts and tourism with 2 other museums, extensive art galleries, and home to the US's largest annual tulip festival. Cool. Brian Nigus is an artist, writer, and curator for the Pacific Northwest Quilt and Fiber Arts Museum. He joined the museum staff in 2023 and is bringing a fresh, modern perspective to the exhibition program. His career as an artist and teacher has taken him to Wisconsin, Minnesota, China, Papua New Guinea, and Ireland before landing in Washington State. He was the co-director, curator of Present Works Gallery in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and has had his sculptural work exhibited in numerous solo and group shows, as well as many publications. And Amy Green is the executive director at the Pacific Northwest Quilt and Fiber Arts Museum. Before coming to Washington State in 2013, she was a director at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 6 years, and the executive director at Ringing Rocks Foundation in Sedona, Arizona, prior to that. Although she has spent almost 30 years in nonprofit administration roles on the West Coast, with the last almost 11 years at the museum, she will be retiring and returning to her roots in New England at the end of July, and she looks forward to finally having time to make her own fiber art. Hallelujah, and congratulations, Amy. So now I'd like to invite Amy and Brian to turn on their cameras and mics now. Hello.
Hi.
Hey,
Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being with us today and for providing this programming. And I will turn it over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. We really appreciate being asked here today. It's a little daunting, 314 people so far, but still really exciting because I know you're all quilters and fiber artists, and we're all going to be here to talk about that and have some fun. So in May of 2022, our last curator passed away very unexpectedly. And it took me almost a year to find a new one, which is probably not too unusual, but it felt like a really, really long time to go without a curator. And then I hired Brian in February of last year. And I knew when I hired him that he would bring a really interesting new perspective and some much needed fresh blood. And just, I knew he'd be a little bit of a shock to our constituents, but I also knew it was a shock that we needed to help us move to the next step. So I'm really, really excited to have him here. Let me start getting my screen ready to share. There we go. And
it's doing presenter view, Amy.
oh, of course it is. Let me take it back to another one.
That's
Okay.
good.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. So Shift Change is an exhibition that's going to run until the end of April here. It opened in March. It's had an absolutely phenomenal reception by our audience, and it's spanned the gamut of reactions, which I'll let Brian talk about that a little bit later, but it's been really interesting. And when we say that it's not every day that a museum hires a curator, that's especially true here. The curator that we had for I don't know, probably the first 10 or 12 years, retired in 2017. And then I had 3 more curators between that and when Brian was hired last year. So it's been an interesting process for us, and it's been really fun. And one of the things that Brian and I talked about when he first started is how to introduce him to our community. And so we talked about, a special exhibit, how do we bring people along in our journey of starting this shift in the updated vision, a broader selection of artists. And that's how this exhibit came about. And I know Brian's going to talk about that a little bit more. Shift Change contains 21 artists from across the USA and Canada. They're all working in methods related to quilt and fiber arts, and it includes a wide range: modern, contemporary, weaving, knitting, sculpture, all kinds of stuff. And Brian and I are going to talk about all of that in just a few minutes. Brian, I already know that you're an artist. We talked about that a little bit in the bio. So tell us a little bit about what type of art you do and your training, what you brought to the table.
Yeah, so I went to school for sculpture at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. And my studies included wood, metal, ceramics, plastics, performance installation, everything but quilts and fiber arts. So I'm a little bit of an outsider in that regard. But in terms of my current practice, I still have a painting practice, and I use a lot of mold making in that practice. So silicone casting, stuff like that. But really, since my senior year of college, curating has really been the stand-in for my art practice, from working with a group of friends to curate a dilapidated bookshop to then running Present Works Gallery in Milwaukee that you mentioned earlier. My friend Maura and we renovated an old shoe factory in Milwaukee, Wisconsin to be a live workspace. And the title of that exhibit was also a little bit of a wordplay, or the title of the gallery, I should say, because we focused on present workers, so emerging artists, young artists, and providing them with a platform to exhibit their work. So kind of since 2010, I've really been focused on curating experiences, curating exhibits, and helping others have a platform.
So we're going to go through the visuals of this exhibit. We're not going to necessarily stop a lot on all of them because I have some that I want to ask you some specific questions. But I'm going to bring up the very first one. And I wanted to know, what preconceived ideas did you bring to the table from your own artistic discipline and training, like, about quilts and fiber arts, and how, if at all, did they prove invalid?
Yeah. So when I have a very academic background, I went to art school for 4 years. I was required to read about 500 pages of philosophy and theory every week for different liberal arts classes. And we were just really drilled with thinking and not always making. And that, those art history courses, a majority of which were very based on Western, white, patriarchal viewpoints of art. So not a lot of quilt art history, not a lot of quilt history, not a lot of quilt world terminology, especially from the quilt world's point of view. And when you first interviewed me for this position, I remember you asking me, so what do you think about quilts and fiber arts? And my very first, I'm a little bit embarrassed that I forgot about this because we did practice some of these questions and answers yesterday. I forgot to mention that my mom is a quilter. And so yes, I grew up with a mom who quilted, but not a mom that was pursuing quilting as a professional artist. So when you asked me thinking about quilts, and I was thinking about this museum as an art museum, my first point of reference was Tracy Emin, who was an artist of the Young British Artist movement, and she had focused mainly in installation art and then gotten into quilts and blankets. But her first quilt that she made was in 1993, which was a couple of years after the National Quilt Museum, or it was the
Yeah.
National Quilt Museum started in 1991.
I think so.
So yeah, so my point of reference was her, and she is an artist that was coming from the art world, making quilts, as opposed to a quilter making art, and maybe trying to get into the art world, or vice versa. And so I had this kind of division in my head, and I wasn't completely aware of all the amazing artists that work in the quilt medium. And so when you hired me, and we had gaps in our exhibit schedule, I mean, I spent so much time just researching new quilters. I found all the different websites and social media platforms, and just started looking. And so I started creating Pinterest boards and organizing quilters and fiber artists into like their geographic region. And that's how I started to learn about what was happening. And then I also was introduced to Martha Seelman, Teresa de Wong. I started having conversations with people who I thought were really important. And yeah, so I started learning. My job was really just learning. And a couple of things that I really learned was absorbing these new definitions of terms. And so, for instance, a couple of them are like the word modern. For me, coming to the museum and hearing the word modern, I think about a period of time in art that's from the 1860s to the 1950s, and all the movements in art that happened during that time. When I talk about the word modern with quilters, it's mostly associated with the Modern Quilt Guild. And interestingly enough, they're both different definitions, but they are both terms that are used by quilters and by artists to have originally kind of rejected or grown from traditionalism. So painters in the 1860s were moving on from traditionalism. Quilters in the 90s they're moving away from traditionalism. And so that was something I had to grasp and absorb. And then another one was the term art quilt, which I thought was, when I first heard it, I thought it was really redundant. And so maybe that's a compliment to where we are in the quilt world now. But I, of course, view quilts as art. So to think that needs to have the word there, it didn't make sense. And I had an interview with Martha Seelman, and she helped me learn about the history of the term. Amy, you bought me this wonderful book called Art Quilts Unfolding. And so I've just really learned a lot about how the quilt world has developed, and kind of how that barrier still exists. And there's like a little bit of this gray area and flux where kind of both sides are opening up to each other. And you and I have talked a lot about not wanting definitions anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
So I know you talked about trying to learn. I'm going to go to the next piece just so people can see kind of what we're working with. So when you first came to the museums, there were already several exhibits that were scheduled that you kind of inherited. And so when I brought up the idea of curating an introduction exhibit, how did the concept shift change develop? Was there an overriding philosophy of the exhibit? And you also had talked to me before about the standard of museum quality being an aspect of your exhibit.
Yeah. So you'll have to remind me to talk about the museum quality aspect when I start talking too much.
Okay.
So yeah, when the exhibit and when we started discussing this group show, we started talking about how this exhibit was it was meant to be kind of a sampler platter of my interests. It was a way to introduce my interests as a new curator to the museum, to introduce myself to the community, say, here's what's to come. And several of the artists, especially, they have solo shows coming to the museum in the next couple of years. So it was important to kind of it's like a pseudo self-portrait of myself to share with our community. And the show is not, it's a different kind of cohesive, because a lot of these artworks may not be exhibited together in any normal situation. So the artworks have enough space where you can view them on their own and think about the artists. And it's meant to highlight the artists and themselves, give them the spotlight. So in terms of, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I know you put a lot more information on the wall tags about the artists and have provided a lot more context, which has been really beneficial, especially with this exhibit.
Yeah, and that was kind of a twofold strategy. The joke with this exhibit was that I was hoping I would still have my job after this exhibit went up, because it was a little bit of a trust fall. But I wanted to persuade our audience with each artwork has a bio of the artist next to them. So there's like a description of their practice, a little portion of their CV, and then a tag that speaks to the artwork itself. So there's this context that you can take in each artist and really appreciate them. And so I wanted to persuade our audience to say, these artists are really worth celebrating, and they've been celebrated before, just not by us. I mean, we're a little bit late to the game in terms of these artists. I mean, they all have really amazing resumes. Max here, he just had a solo show at the Center for Contemporary Craft. There's a piece the artist is in the collection of the Smithsonian. We have a Nettie Award finalist from Washington. They all just have really amazing accolades. And so I wanted, and then the second side of that speaks to maybe my philosophy as a curator in general. Because I think when I go to museums, you kind of have to take the word of the curator or like whoever has decided on the show. Maybe it's a patron that has $1 million and has said, this is the show I want, or you kind of have to take the word of the person who's put the exhibit together. And if there's not context given to these artists, I'm usually left wondering about why am I looking at this? I can appreciate art and I can let art affect me and give me feelings. But I also sometimes want more information. So that's where those tags came in. And we don't do that for every show. That's right. So.
Well, and you had also mentioned before about there's 34 pieces of artwork. And how did you divide those up?
Well, it wasn't, I so I have a math background as well. I have a degree in mathematics. So I do everything in spreadsheets and pie charts. And Amy has looked at the behind the scenes of my computer and just said, never share that with anybody. Because it
Well,
won't
your
make
thinking
sense.
is a little different
Yeah.
than most people would look at it.
And so, yes, there are 9 quilts in the exhibit. And the quilts are all different kinds of quilts. They represent, different styles, different methods, different techniques. Taylor here on the left, she's a designer, but also has made this quilt. And then the rest of the pieces, the 25 other pieces are fiber art works. And they just, as you mentioned at the beginning, they span the gamut of knitting, weaving, soft sculptures, installation. And so it just was really important for me to have diversity in the artworks themselves. So,
But you also
Yeah.
had a very specific eye for what you consider museum quality.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know that that has some to do with the accolades that the artists have come with and where they've shown. So it's a breathtaking exhibit. With Taylor and Amanda's pieces here, I really wouldn't normally expect to see these two pieces in the same exhibit.
Mhm.
So why did you choose these two?
Yeah, and we'll see through the other slides too that there's lots of different quilts, or there's 9 different quilts. Taylor, so both Amanda and Taylor are members of the Modern Quilt Guild. And for whatever that means, they're both extremely different from each other, both these quilts. Taylor owns her own modern quilt design company called Toad and Sew. She creates and sells patterns. She works with her community on sew-alongs, mystery blocks, things like that. She left being a designer at Microsoft during the pandemic because she wanted to have something more real in her life, and she kind of fell into fabric and made a quilt, and then realized she's a designer and she should design quilt patterns. And this is also the first time she's ever exhibited at a museum. So, not every artist in the exhibit has like what I would consider like art accolades, or like, for instance, like Adeline Wang, this was her first exhibit. And yet, like, they're people that affect our culture and people that have communities that surround them. And that's kind of, those are more reasons why I chose artists, was that they seemed or appeared to be people that were affecting their communities and their followers. Amanda, she's a high school art teacher. She makes one of a kind hand-sewn improvisational quilts. And there's actually, I chose Amanda because there were actually 2 other improv quilters in the show, Zach Foster and Heidi Parks. And Amanda, I mean, to me, it felt like I couldn't have Zach and Heidi without Amanda because they're all friends. And so it felt like I didn't want to like split up the community, so they were, every time I saw a Heidi quilt, I saw an Amanda quilt. And every time I saw a Zach quilt, I saw an Amanda quilt. And so they just seemed like they needed to be in the space together. But also, like, Amanda's work has drawings using embroidery, and those drawings are from her sons. and I have a 3-year-old that I draw with every day and a 6-month-old. And so, I mean, her work was it felt very personal to me as well. Like I've been very in dad mode. So both of these pieces connect to each of the artists' kind of personal histories.
But I've got a couple others here that I want to ask you about specifically. So I'm just going to scroll through these next couple of pieces. I remember looking at this one. I'm a weaver, so this one was really stunning to me, absolutely stunning. And Jess, this has been really fun. And just as sort of an aside, we recently hired Jess here at the museum as our new education program manager. So we're really excited to have her on board. And then Lee, this piece over here, the drift, it takes a few minutes for me personally. I am a very kind of a traditional art person in many ways. And it took me a little bit of time to really reflect on that piece and really begin to understand it. So here's Julie and Zach. And one of the first things that I noticed when I was going through all of the pictures and the slides was like, Julie's looks like a t-shirt too. And so there were just visual similarities to me. So tell me what these pieces represent in your exhibit.
Yeah, well, they both represent something completely different. And it's funny because when you brought this up, I would not have noticed that Julie's piece also has kind of the same compositional feel to Zach's, even though I have been looking at all the images digitally. But they both kind of came to the exhibit in separate manners. Zach was one of the very first artists to sign up for the exhibit. I did Zoom meetings with nearly every artist, and Zach, he said yes right away. I didn't need to do a Zoom with him at all. He was just so, from the get-go, a positive force and really amazing to work with. And he has a community that he's that he brings together with his Seamside podcast. Julie, when I was planning out the exhibit, I wanted some like hyper local artists. Our region, and I didn't quite understand this until 8 or 9 months into the job, but our region is just full of fiber artists and quilters, and so I really wanted to highlight people that were close to home. Julie's originally from Alaska, but she's been living in Anacortes, which is just the next town over from our museum. And she has this amazing studio space where she makes her quilts. And this is actually a quite small piece for her. Her pieces that she likes to exhibit are quilts that are like 15 feet wide by 15 feet tall, and they take up your whole perceptual space. And she's all about color and drawing with lines, and she's a student of Nancy Crow's, and she's just like, and she's so nice. Like, I can't say this enough about all the artists in this exhibit. Everyone is so nice. But Julie and Zach both, what they ended up representing for me is that they're both fosters of community. Zach has his Seamside and quilting nook that he runs, and he's always challenging people through his live Instagram reels, and he puts together events for quilters, and he educates. And Julie, she's constantly asking artists to come together for conversations, and she organizes Fiber Optics, which is a kind of like a local regional quilt guild, but she also has dinners at her studio where she's the only quilter, and there's sculptors and painters and photographers. There's a photographer, and we all just get together and talk about art. And so she's really engaged in kind of pushing this idea of art in our valley, and trying to help build it. So that's
Was-
what the
Was Julie one of the artists? You and I had a brief conversation, a little bit of an aside, but was Julie one of the artists who didn't think her artwork would fit in here at the museum?
yeah.
But she really thought we were really very traditional,
Mhm.
and weren't viewing quilts and fiber art as art, which they are. And yeah, I'm really pleased that you were able to get both of these in here. It's really fun to hear about what they're doing in the community.
Yeah,
Let's see. Go
when I
ahead.
went to visit Julie, I mean, she's known about the museum for a long time, and our museum, and you can speak to this more, but was founded on traditionalism in the sense that that's what we had access to. And yeah, Julie shows in contemporary art galleries. And so when I approached her, wanting to have a show, she was concerned that our audience might not be the audience that she wanted to view her works. And I just tried to describe this exhibit, and I talked to her a lot about this idea of shift change and kind of this new direction, and also that it wasn't really a new direction. The museum, from looking at the records, has had quite a few contemporary exhibits. But I think maybe when some people hear the word quilt, or they see an old Victorian mansion,
Yeah.
they think, they just have that connotation of oh, that's an old house.
Yeah.
it's gonna be old. So,
And I mean,
yeah.
that's true. A lot of times, just especially new visitors have a preconceived idea before they walk in the door that they're going to see a lot of their grandma's quilts.
Mhm.
And we get interesting reactions to all of that. Let's go on here just a little bit more. Julian and Joey, I had another one here that I wanted to ask you about. Oh, this is so much fun. I really had a fun time reading this one. And I really related to everything that he wanted or she wanted. Okay, so this is Mashonda. And this is one of the three-dimensional kind of exhibits that are in the piece. And then the next one I'm going to show you here is Mark Menke. And I thought that the three-dimensional aspect of this really stood out through the rest of the exhibit. And I wondered what your thinking was behind this.
Yeah. Well, to me, I mean, to start off with, the namesake of our museum is quilt and fiber arts. And I mean, not every fiber art is three-dimensional, but it was important for me to have something that kind of came off the wall and into the space. My background is as a sculptor, so I
Right.
have a tendency to love sculptures, and I also relate to everything with my body. I know that might sound weird to say or think about, but when I see a work in space at a museum, even if it's a quilt on the wall or painting or what, scale plays a really important part to me. And so it was important that maybe that feeling come across so that people start to relate to these pieces that appear in space. Kindle's is also a sweater, and hers has, like, you can recognize a body inside of it because it's a sweater. Mark's is also an outfit, so you can imagine wearing it. But
And what are these made out of?
these are made out of contemporary feed sacks. So
Oh,
Mark,
contemporary.
yeah, modern day feed sacks. And so Mark's from a third generation dairy farm. He's an out gay man. And he utilizes, he takes advantage of the history of feed sacks and textiles. If anyone, I'm sure many of you are aware of this, but from the early 1900s, our history of using feed sacks to make clothing. Mark uses contemporary feed sacks, which is not material to make clothing out of, obviously, because it's like plasticized paper. But he thinks about these as a form of kind of camouflage or a way to think about like passing. So like passing is straight or passing in kind of these hyper masculinized cultures of being on a farm, like hauling bays of hail, being real macho. And so he creates these like really just well done clothing items. I mean, they have all the same stitches that you'd find in a suit.
Very tailored.
Yeah, they're very well tailored.
And I know that it's not really presented as quote unquote wearable art, but do you think he ever wore any of it?
Oh yeah, he's worn them. They're size right for him. So
Oh, nice.
yeah. So
I know we've only got a few minutes left here in our part, so I want to go through the next for just a minute to get to my favorite piece. Oh, these were fun. I really enjoyed Allison's little bites. What were they called? Little treats?
the snacks. Yeah.
The snacks. That was really fun. And Heidi's piece is right outside my door here in the hall. And every time I go by it, I see more and more and more stuff in it. It is so interesting. Here's Kendall's piece you were talking about.
Yeah. So I don't want to take too long on this because I know we want to talk about the paper doll, but this, I wanted to mention Kendall Ross's sweater as well as Joey Veltkamp's quilt from before. And you know, when we talk about like a point of reference for quilt making, and I talked about Tracy Emin using quilts and blankets, you know, she was taking the medium of a quilt and using it to add symbol and meaning to her work rather than just making a painting or making a drawing. And that's what Joey and Kendall are doing. I mean, Joey used to make drawings of blankets. He used to make drawings of quilts. And at a certain point, he realized these pieces of paper don't have a sense of being comfortable. Like they don't give a sense of softness. And for him, a quilt is something that wraps you up. It holds your dreams. It holds your nightmares. It's a symbol of something that, you know, you think you cuddle under it with somebody, and a piece of paper doesn't provide that sense. And even a canvas that a painting is on, a canvas is kind of neutralized, right? And so for Joey, it's really important that his works are quilts because a quilt provides that added symbol. And Kendall, her knit sweaters could very easily be drawings. They could very easily be paintings. And yet she is making sweaters.
Yeah.
And so there's this added sense that there's a body present. There's someone that wears this. And so when you see her sweater in person, you think about wearing it yourself, or you envision the person whose voice it is on the sweater wearing it. And so there's like this performative aspect to her work too. Like she creates sweaters with 2 neck holes. She creates sweaters that are like 6 feet wide and totally nonsensible to be wearing. So she's really having a lot of fun with her sweaters too. But she's thinking of the sweater as like the canvas and how it adds more meaning to her work, like how the form adds more meaning to the image, I guess.
I know personally, I've been a lifelong knitter. So for me, this piece was really jaw dropping because the knitting techniques on it are just stellar. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. And I could not even imagine doing the kind of color work that she's done here, much less choose the messages that she's chosen to share.
Yeah.
It's been really fun to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kendall's going to have a solo show at our museum. She's going to have about 35 sweaters up on the 3rd floor. So that's going to be really fun to put together.
I know, but it's after I'm gone.
Yeah.
You can send me pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really wanted to get to this. This is our last slide, and this is Helen Parsons. I had fun talking to her at the opening reception. She's just a really fun, engaging, and passionate person about the fiber arts. But I absolutely fell in love with this paper doll piece. And the picture that we have of it is in process, and it's part of a series. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Helen's really involved in thinking about, again, textile history. And of course, paper dolls have a history in America. And so she and her family had these paper dolls, and so she's wanted to kind of blow them up and celebrate them and work with them as these large bodies. And
yeah, this piece is taller than me.
Yeah, so it's larger than life size, I would say. But then she does like a lot of over painting, and then you can see it a bit on the big boy piece on the left, but she like quilts on top of it, and does all this stitching, and then she leaves all these loose threads kind of hanging on it, and so she so yeah, there are these large pieces. It's a series, and yeah, I was lucky to get her involved in the show because she's represented by a gallery, Spirit Art Gallery in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And she makes work all year round for one solo show, and then all of her work gets sold. And then she makes work throughout the next year, all for the next solo show, and it gets sold. And so like we're borrowing these two pieces
For the next solo.
Yeah, so she's working on, we just kind of it was like the right timing to include her work. But yeah, she uses graffiti culture, urban imagery. She examines things that have kind of like gone by the wayside. I don't know if there's any big boys that still exist, but she
Oh, I don't know.
she includes a lot of like dilapidated buildings and thinking about this like history and space and place. And so part of that too is the ski mask that gets involved and shows up in her work if you see it, if you see more of her work. But for her, the ski mask is it's not so much bank robbery and mischief. It's more her sons wore ski masks, going skiing in Washington and playing in the snow and having fun and being mischievous and playing. And that's how she sees people engaging in the urban landscape too. It's just this like sense of play. And so she's combining that sense of play with the sense of play we had with paper dolls.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the problem here is that Brian and I can talk on and on and on and on and on because it's really fascinating. I've learned a lot since Brian has started here. And Brian, you've been an absolutely joyful addition to the staff. I'm thrilled with the way that you're pushing us a little bit, but doing it in ways that's educational. And I just really enjoy it. So thanks for letting me ask you all these questions.
Yeah, not a problem.
And as your boss, I did not insist you do it.
You had a choice. Oh my gosh, that was a great interview and such a teaser. What an incredible exhibit. I love the title. I see now exactly why you named it that. You did such a good job of bringing it alive. And I know that I think there's a lot of interest in seeing some of the slides again, Amy. And
Oh,
if
okay.
you want to do that, there's some folks have asked for some specific pieces, so we can get to that if you want to bring those back up at that point. But I wanted to say too, let's first of all give the dates of the show again.
Okay. Let's go back up here.
Yeah, so make
March
sure. Okay.
6th through April 28th.
Okay, so you've got a limited amount of time, folks. Someone asked if the text of the panels is on the website. I could not find it.
No,
Okay, will there be a catalog folks could order?
we rarely do catalogs. It's something that we'd like to make more of a normal procedure for us, but at this time, there's no plans for a
It's a lot
catalog.
of work and money. Yeah.
I think we are arranging to have this videoed,
Oh, cool.
but I'm not quite sure what we're going to do with that just yet.
Well,
Yeah.
the Quilt Alliance could work with you to give you the very simple DIY version of Go Tell It. That's a video of each artist talking about their work in front of the quilt for 3 minutes or less. So we could talk about that. We would be glad to post those and upload if you upload the videos. Oh, great. Okay, so there are some links here. I just put a link to the exhibition page so people can find that. Everybody is torqued about this show. This audience is great. It's so fun to see where everybody's coming from too. What fiber arts you're doing. So if you hadn't been already, say in the chat what kind of work you're doing, because I think this is such a neat show of bringing together all these different processes and artists with different perspectives, concepts. Very cool. I love the contrast to the museum building itself that you mentioned. So I've got, okay, a month. I've got to get there. Someone asked, and this is a very open question from Gail Trotter, what defines an artist? Whew, that's a tough one. Brian, do you have an answer for that?
In 30 seconds or
In
less?
30 seconds, no, you've got a little more than that, but.
I mean, everyone has their own definition of an artist, and that's kind of when I talked about the word modern and the word art quilt earlier. It's become this hill that I'm not willing to die on, because there's every quilter and artist defines themselves differently. And so I had originally planned to kind of organize some of my Pinterest boards into like an art quilter, a modern quilter. And so it's easier to define artists between like those that are seeking to do it professionally versus those that are not. And you know, in my mind, everyone can be an artist. It just depends on what kind of level you're wanting to take it to. So,
Yeah,
It's sort of like trying to define what is art.
it totally. That's
there's
maybe.
there's a really great quote by Louise Bourgeois that I refer to a lot when someone says like, how do you know if something is art? And that she was asked that question in an interview, and her response was, you just feel it. And it speaks to this idea that art is completely subjective. So if you think something's art, great, it's art to you. But art that has been defined over time, you know, unfortunately, the people that have written the history books are white men, and we don't get a good look at all the different art that's been around forever. But that was her response, and I find that a really important notion to keep in mind, because things that I value aren't always the same things that other people value. And Amy mentioned this kind of like span of reactions to the Shift Change show. And so and we have this little guest book that people on all the floors of exhibits, people can sign their names and say what they thought of the exhibit. Someone had written that I have execrable taste and that it's the ugliest, worst show they've ever seen in their 20 years of coming to the museum. And
And they signed it.
And they signed it. And I had to look up the word execrable, and it's still hard to pronounce. But the next page said it was literally the best show that they'd ever seen in their life, and they were crying. And in fact, the next day, Amy thought there was an artist that was visiting, and she let them into the office, and she was standing at my desk crying about how inspiring the show was. And I was like, let's go stand in the gallery so we could talk.
Oh, wow.
So there's been very different reactions from lots of different people. And what's really cool is that guest book there's been a lot more thoughtful responses and people actually writing things and not just signing their names. So there's people that want to have a conversation when they see this show, which I really like. So.
Well,
I would have to say that overall, the response has been extremely positive.
Yeah. But also creating a space and an opportunity for someone to weigh in, even to say it's not, this isn't the show that I was expecting, or this is not a show that I like.
Mhm.
That's still a win, because you got some interaction from the viewers and they felt safe enough to write that and put their name. So, well done. And what an interesting chat, and what an interesting audience we've had today too. Thank you all for being here and for, putting your 2 cents and what you're doing in the comments. I hope that each and every one of you can go to this show. I know that's probably not possible. We're spread out all over the world, but thank you for bringing a little bit of it to us. Well done, both of you, and congratulations on your retirement, Amy.
Oh, thank you.
So happy for you, and well done you for bringing Brian to the museum too. Yay, well done, right?
Yeah.
If you want to stop your screen share, I'll start mine just to remind folks that about next week's talk, we've got, I also want to say, please consider looking up the Quilts Alliance, find out what we're about. We'd love to have you as a member. We'd love to have you as someone who subscribes to our podcast, where we do talk about the QSOS Oral History Collection. And next week on Textile Talks, we will have, this looks so interesting. What a beautiful piece. Yoko Sakita's one-of-a-kind quilt world will be next week, presented by Sakwa. And thank you again to all of our sponsors. We're going to play our video again. And thank you all for being here. Hope everyone has a wonderful week.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.